Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Pre-Proposal Conference for CCFP RFP 1, RFP number 200003850, which is the traditional CCFP RFP. Just a few notes before we get started. One, everyone, please place your questions with regards to the solicitation in the chat box. Do not raise your hand. And two, we will try to address each question off the cuff. This will not be the final answer. The final answer to your questions will be published in the addenda that will be released in a few days after the pre-proposal conference. First, we're going to walk through the agenda and then we'll get started. So for today's agenda, welcome and staff introductions will be done by Sarah Allen from NCS. We'll walk through the overview and process improvement for CCFP RFP 1. Then we'll do the notable enhancement. After that, it will be the funding categories that will be discussed by Ramona. She will present both the funding categories and the enhancement. The procurement requirements will be presented by myself. RFP forms will also be presented by myself, and the RFP budget forms and attachments will be presented by Vanessa Calderon. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who is going to officially welcome you to the conference, as well as allow staff to introduce themselves. Sarah?
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Allen. I am one of the Deputy Directors with Neighborhood and Community Services. Thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate your commitment to serving Fairfax County residents and to supporting our most vulnerable residents. The Health and Human Services safety net in Fairfax County is robust and strong due to the organizations that are on this call and for those that are committed to working with our residents and the commitment that you all have for the safety and well-being for all of our residents. So thank you for joining us. As you may know, many of you, it's great to see many of your names that I recognize. However, some of you are new. And so we'd like to just take a moment and talk a little bit about the funding pool. And as you know, we have most of this information in the RFP itself, but the Consolidated Community Funding Pool is our way to do a competitive funding process for human services programs developed and administered by you all, nonprofits and community-based organizations. The funding allocated to the organizations and successful candidates through the CCFP serves as an investment and a catalyst for strengthening the human services network of programs available for Fairfax County residents. The management and strategic direction for the funding pool is done through a partnership with the Department of Procurement and Material Management, so DPMM. Michelle and her colleagues will introduce everyone in a moment. Neighborhood and Community Services, NCS, the Department of Housing and Community Development, as well as the Consolidated Community Funding Pool Advisory Committee, or CCFAC, which is a resident group established by the board and is charged with the responsibility to advise the Board of Supervisors on the development and implementation of the federally required consolidated plan, as well as the recommended CCFP priorities or categories, that we're going to go over in a second. And it's all of this information is based on the community feedback and staff assessments of human services needs, as well as community development needs within the county. So now we'd like to introduce the staff that are directly supporting this project. So if you are a staff member that is supporting this, could you please raise your hand, your virtual hand, and I'll call on you to please introduce yourself, the agency in which you work for, and your position. And we're doing this, so bear with us. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we're doing this so that you know the team that is working to support this process, and you'll be working with all of us moving forward. Okay. I'm going to start with Ramona.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ramona Carroll. I work for the Department of Neighborhood and Community Services, and I'm the equity manager there.
Thank you, Michelle Brizzi.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, I'm Michelle Brizzi. I'm the contract supervisor and administrator for the Consolidated Community Funding Pool, and I work in Department of Procurement and Material Management.
Great. Vanessa Calderon.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Calderon, and I am a contract analyst at the Department of Procurement and Material Management.
Thank you. Devin Thornton.
My name is Devin Thorne. I'm a contract specialist for the Department of Procurement and Material Management.
Great, thank you. Marla Zemetsky.
Good afternoon. My name is Marla Semetsky, and I work for Neighborhood and Community Services, and I serve as the Cross-System Prevention Manager.
Thanks, Marla. Jonathan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jonathan Melendez, also with Neighborhood and Community Services, and also with Cross Systems Prevention.
Thanks, Jonathan. Derek Solomon.
Hello, everybody. My name is Derek Solomon. I'm a contract specialist with the Department of Procurement and Material Management.
And Andrew Janos.
Good afternoon, Andrew Janos with the Department of Procurement and Material Management.
Wonderful. Thank you all. This is the team that will be supporting this effort moving forward. We will be getting the information that you need, as well as supporting the Selection Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee. So that we are the group that's going to be supporting this process. Next slide, please. Great. Wanted to do a quick overview. Again, many of you have put forward proposals for consideration in previous years for the funding pool, but some of you may be new. So wanted to just also walk through some significant changes that were done to the funding pool so that we could best meet the community needs. This is RFP 1, as we call it. And so I'm going to go into a little bit that we also have an RFP 2. Many of you also apply for that as well. But going back a little bit, in December of 2020, a joint board matter was directing the staff to review CCFP and make recommendations for process improvement. This process improvement was to ensure that residents that had emergency needs in both food and housing, as well as other urgent needs, were able to be satisfied. We found that there was some unintentional consequences for us to be able to be structured the way that we were initially. And so starting last cycle, the process changes and process improvement changes were implemented, and they were implemented in FY 23-24, so last cycle. And what came of that is us having a 2-lane RFP process. So although we have a total bucket in the funding pool of approximately $13.8 million, we have separated it out into 2 RFPs. As we noted, you are in RFP 1 pre-proposal conference right now. That is the traditional CCFP programs that is supporting community needs such as self-sufficiency, recreation, legal services, etc. And that's approximately $8.8 million of the funding is dedicated to this process here. We also knew that we needed to separate out the emergency food and emergency housing assistance because we wanted to ensure that all areas of the county were able to be supported proportional to their needs. And that amount of funding, which is an RFP 2, that pre-proposal conference was this morning, is $5 million, whereby $4 million goes to emergency housing and $1 million goes to emergency food. We also, so that started last cycle, and we've made some adaptations and some enhancements to make sure that this is working successfully. As we will talk about a little bit later, there are also the similar processes for both RFPs take place. So both RFPs have a resident-led selection advisory committee, or a SAC, and they rate the proposals for each proposal. They rate them. They do it in both RFP and RFP 1 and RFP 2, albeit 2 separate SACs, and they recommend funding. CBOs, many of you provided feedback after the last process, and we've incorporated many of those process improvements in both RFP 1 and RFP 2. And then lastly, I just wanted to note that we are continuously looking at improving this process and ensuring that both you as the program provider as well as the residents are receiving the support that they need and the resources that you need to make sure that the human services critical components are being met. So thank you again for showing your interest. And I'm going to turn it over to Ramona, and she's going to note both this as well as the categories. Go ahead, Ramona.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. I just want to share, Sarah mentioned we made some enhancements, and just wanted to talk to you all about the enhancements that we made regarding the equity and approach. So what we did this this cycle is to combine equity and approach approaching equitable practices. And this is part of the technical narrative and it's part C on page 1. And this allows for the collapsing or the merging of the programmatic approach and equitable practices. We will continue to provide you with the One Fairfax video that you'll be able to watch around language so that everyone will have the same foundational information, as well as the One Fairfax policy that you're able to review prior to answering the questions. The purpose of this is to ensure that the approach and the programs, organizational and equitable practices and policies are described clearly. So we're giving you the same support that we gave you last year for review and just combining both the approach and equity. So hopefully you will see that and understand. So that's just one change that we made. Now I'm going to go into the categories, development, the overarching statement, and I will be reading through all of the categories. So I just want to prepare you for that and just pulling out some of the service examples. This is definitely in the RFP, but this gives us the opportunity to make sure that we're all hearing the same thing at the same time. So the overarching statement on categories is these categories were identified as needs and are aligned with the Health and Human Services determinants. Each outcome statement focuses on a broad community definition and specifically includes all individuals, communities and families, income levels, abilities, and ages. Where appropriate, providing legal services, case management, transportation, high quality and affordable childcare, linguistically, and this includes interpretation and translation, culturally and developmentally appropriate services and or other resources that remove barriers and allow participation may be included in all 7 categories of RFP 1, and case management may be included within the 2 categories of RFP 2. So let's go through the categories of RFP 1. First, we have the financial stability, and the outcome statement is to have ability to possess and maintain sufficient income to consistently meet their basic needs with no or minimal financial assistance or subsidies from private or public organizations. As you can see, some of the examples are employment assistance, job and entrepreneurship training, affordable, accessible, quality childcare for family members transitioning into the workplace, programs that support economic mobility and reduce dependency. Those are just a few of the service examples that are there. For food and nutrition, the outcome statement is to have reliable and consistent access to sufficient, affordable, and nutritious food. And this includes which reflect the cultural and religious and situational needs of recipients, to have access to information and education about healthy and nutritious food, and the opportunity to develop the knowledge and resources to practice healthy eating. These examples include educational programs, farmers markets, food co-ops, mobile markets, food provision programs that offer case management services towards self-sufficiency, as well as supplemental food programs such as backpack programs. For health, the outcome statement is to have access to primary specialty oral, behavioral, and long-term health care, particularly prevention services, to develop the knowledge and resources to practice healthy behaviors and to take action to prevent and manage disease and adverse health conditions. And this would include health affordability, accessibility services, particularly oral, visual, and auditory, behavioral health services such as suicide prevention, mental health, drug misuse prevention, and recovery, programs and services that increase access to healthcare services for individuals with limited English proficiency and those with all levels of ability, and health fairs, health screening clinics, dental clinics, and inoculations, and nutrition education. For housing, this outcome statement is to have safe, stable, accessible living accommodations along with other basic necessities, to have access to affordable, accessible housing with the supportive services necessary to live as independently as possible in a community setting. And these services include services to support housing stability and to maximize tenants' ability to live independently. Examples: case management, mental health, alcohol, substance abuse, and independent living, home health visits, home share programs, vocational help, furniture and other household goods, peer support, and social activities. Services to assist individuals transitioning from institutional to home or community-based care, and services to assist individuals and families to locate housing in communities with adequate support networks and services, including opportunities for seniors and persons with special needs. For literacy, education, development, and attainment, the outcome statement is to have the ability to read, write, and communicate effectively in order to manage finances and attain employment goals through academic and vocational achievement, to have access to quality childcare and education and supports to develop employment and independent living skills. And some of these examples are English proficiency services and/or instruction, early childhood development services, including ASL and cued speech training for parents, digital access and literacy program, and services that address the specific needs of individuals with disabilities to meet these outcomes. Positive behaviors and healthy relationships. The outcome statement is to develop positive behaviors and healthy relationships that are safe and free from abuse, neglect, and trauma, and promote physical, emotional, mental, and social well-being. Social environments for isolated individuals and isolated and homebound individuals. So this can include counseling services, conflict resolution and anger management training and counseling, youth-based prevention programs and services focusing on positive behaviors and healthy relations, domestic violence and sexual abuse prevention and recovery services, and programs and services that address the needs of individuals with limited English proficiency and those with all levels of ability. And the final category is support, community, and social networks. And the outcome statement is to have access to local services, including community-based transportation and childcare, and the ability to establish and maintain communal and social relationships. Some of these examples are courses that teach language or culture to help groups interact positively, respite services to help caregivers, affordable, accessible, quality childcare to help parents and guardians stay employed, support services for persons with disabilities, access to recreational activities such as rec center classes, and also Wi-Fi and internet access and computer support. I will now turn the next portion over to my colleagues at DPMF.
Thanks, Ramona. I'm going to walk through the solicitation as soon as Vanessa put that up. Thank you, Vanessa. And I'm going to take control. Now, Vanessa, I'm not able to see the scroll bar to scroll down. Here we go. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to walk through the actual solicitation, just highlighting certain areas that I want to bring to your attention. This does not preclude you from reading the RFP in its entirety. You should read the RFP in its entirety, as well as the resource manual, as well as any addendum that we will publish after this pre-proposal conference. So I wanted to bring to your attention that submitting your proposal, all your proposal responses with regards to this RFP must be submitted through the Bonfire portal. That is mandatory. We will not accept proposals submitted by paper, telephone, or fax transmission or electronic mail, only through Bonfire. So this request for proposal is to solicit applications from eligible nonprofits to provide health, housing, and human services to residents within one or more regions of the County of Fairfax for the Consolidated Community Funding Pool. The funding in the CCFP is available from a combination of local, state, and federal sources. And we have listed out the sources, the three sources here. The first one is a community services block grant, of which 8% of the total funds is made available in the funding pool. The second is a community development block grant, of which only 6% of the funding there is CDBG funding. And the bulk of the funding is the county local dollars, which is the general fund, and that comprises of 86%. You do not apply for a specific funding, you're applying to the CCFP. If upon award, you may receive federal CSBG block grant funding or federal community development block grant funding, but you're only applying to the CCFP. All programs receiving funds from the Community Services Block Grant and Community Development Block Grant will be subject to all federal and state laws, regulations, and guidelines governing these grants. In terms of eligibility, to be eligible for the funding pool dollars, your organization must have a 501c3 tax exempt status, or your organization that have established their 501c3 tax exempt status by February 2024, which includes faith-based or religious organizations. So if you've established your 501c3 tax exempt status by February 2024, you are eligible to apply to the funding pool. Applicants may be located in other jurisdictions. However, if you're awarded a contract, your program must serve only Fairfax County residents. So your organization may be located in Maryland or in DC or wherever, but the program must serve Fairfax County residents only. I have received this questions a few times, so I really want to stress that. Pre-proposal conference. So we're here today at the pre-proposal conference, which is a venue that affords you the opportunity to get clarification on any questions that you may have regarding this RFP. The conference is being recorded, and a copy of the recorded pre-proposal conference will be made available within 10 business days. That's by Monday, October 13. We will strive, we're working hard to get it out sooner. We're hoping to release that in Bonfire, as well as place the recording on the CCFP website for everyone to see. All questions regarding the solicitations should be directed to myself, Michelle Brizzi, at the dpmmccfp@fairfaxcounty.gov. That's our main funding pool email address. The final date for all applicants to submit questions so that you can receive responses ahead of the closing date of the RFP is November 8, 2023 at 2 p.m. Any questions after that time, we will not accept, because we will not have time to get that published ahead of the RFP closing. So please note the deadline, November 8, 2023 at 2 p.m. Notice of all addendas will be posted in Bonfire. It is the applicant's responsibility to check Bonfire frequently for addendas. Once we publish an addenda, an email is sent out to all registered applicants. So please check your spam or junk email consistently to see if there are any newly released addenda. Proposal guidelines. All proposed programs should address no more than 2 of the funding categories listed below. And Ramona just went through all the funding categories, including the overarching statement, so I don't have to repeat that. So you're only limited to 2 of these funding categories when you submit your response to the RFP. Bear with me. Just trying to scroll through all of the categories. Okay, so basis for awards. So this RFP includes 2 submission formats for applicants. One of the format is for applicants who are requesting greater than $50,000 per year. And the second, which we call technical narrative B, is for those applicants requesting less than or equal to $50,000 per year. Okay, so this is a 2-year award. So if you're requesting less than $50,000, then you'll be getting that amount for each year for the award cycle. If you're requesting greater than $50,000, and let's say you were awarded $100,000, so each year you would get $100,000. As Sarah mentioned in her presentation, a county resident-led SAC will be responsible for evaluating the proposal. The SAC evaluation process runs from January through March. So our SAC process will begin January of next year and wind up at the end of March of next year. The SAC will use the established evaluation criteria to rank each proposal that is submitted. Each criterion element is rated separately. And below we have a chart of the various criterion. The technical proposal will be reviewed first. And here are the 4 criterion for the technical proposal. Please note that the equitable approach, which is a new approach, the new process that Ramona explained, I don't have to go back through that, values 24 points. So this is where you're going to get your maximum points. Below that is the cost proposal, which include the budget and budget justification for 20 points. How to apply? Once again, I'll reiterate, proposal must be received electronically through the Fairfax County online procurement portal, which is Bonfire. We've also provided a list of helpful guides to help you through this process when you are submitting your proposal. We have the vendor registration guide, the creating and uploading a submission guide, as well as a user guide. Another question that we frequently get each cycle is how many programs can you submit? So there are no limits to the number of programs an organization can submit. Each proposal must be submitted separately with all the requested forms and attachments. Once again, their deadline for submitting all your proposal, they must be received by 2 o'clock on Tuesday, December 5th, 2023. So we're moving to the proposal instructions and checklist. The checklist is just a guide to ensure that you have completed all the necessary forms that is required in your submission. So as we provided you with check boxes to the left, so you can check off as you go along that you have completed each section. So in terms of the technical proposal, what I want to highlight is that you must have the person who's legally authorized to sign the proposal cover sheet do so. Also, the point of contact, we're stressing that the point of contact on the DPMM cover sheet be your executive director or chief executive officer, or even your board chair in absence of an executive director. The reason why we're stressing that is to prevent any issues on the back end if you are awarded a contract and you have listed someone other than your ED and that person received the award letter and the ED did not. So to ensure that the person who needs to get this information get it, we're insisting that you place your ED, your CEO, or your board chair in absence of one of the other on the DPMM cover sheet. There are 2 forms, technical narrative form associated with the RFP. Proposal content A are for those applicants requesting funding greater than $50,000. And the second is Proposal Content B, the technical narrative form, and that is for applicants requesting funding less than or equal to $50,000. So please ensure that you are using the correct form to submit your response. In terms of the Form 3 Program Outcome Worksheet, applicants should select at least one of the standardized program outcomes, and the standardized program outcome sheet is also in Bonfire. So you're going to look at it and select at least one of the standardized program outcome, and should, where applicable, include additional program outcomes that are relevant to their proposal. And those are the agency developed outcome. And this is the difference between RFP 1 and RFP 2. In RFP 2, there are prescribed standardized outcomes and indicators that you must use. In RFP 1, you can use at least one of the standardized agency outcomes. And if you have agency developed outcomes, we will accept those. Applicants may submit a maximum of 7 Form 3 outcome worksheets. We have to provide a limit because our system, our Weber invoicing system, can only hold so many outcomes. So your limit is 7. We move to the cost proposal section. I wanted to highlight Form 4, the program budget. Applicants' indirect expenditures, management, and general expenses should not exceed Fairfax County 2021 indirect cost rate of 14.12%, unless otherwise stated. If you are awarded CSBG funding later on, and you're designated a federal subrecipient, then the organization's federally approved indirect cost rate or the minimum rate of 10% will be utilized and addressed during negotiations. So everyone must prepare their budget using the county indirect cost rate of 14.12%. And later on, if you're awarded CSBG funding and designated a subrecipient, then you will be able to use the federally approved indirect cost rate for your program or the de minimis rate. And then you have the check boxes for all the attachments. I just want to draw your attention that applicants who do not have an audit at the time of submission must provide written justification for lack of not having an audit. If funded, the organization will be required to submit an audit following the first year of operation. And the final section on the checklist is trade secrets, proprietary information. Scroll down a little bit more. Trade secrets or proprietary information submitted by an offer in connection with a procurement transaction shall not be subject to public disclosure under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. However, offerers must invoke the protections of this section prior to or upon submission of the data or other materials. If you're requesting protection of trade secrets, you will need to complete attachment 7. And I also want to highlight that classification of an entire proposal document will not be accepted. So your whole proposal cannot be protected as proprietary information. So I'm going to now go through the forms that you will be required to submit in response to the RFP. The first form is a proposal cover sheet. What I want to draw your attention to is the date and time of closing once again, and also any questions you may have should be submitted to me at this email address, the dpmmccfp@fairfaxcounty.gov. Once again, I want to mention that your contact person listed here should be your executive director or CEO or board chair or board chairperson. You will also ensure that you have the person who is legally authorized to sign for the program or organization print their name here. Form 2. So on the Form 2, you're going to tell us your program title and your organization name, and you're going to check whether this is a brand new program that have never, ever received funding pool dollars, or if you're currently funded by the CCFP, or if you were funded in the past, but you are no longer funded, you're going to check this box right here. The new program box is only for programs that have never been funded by the CCFP. The list of funding categories are all here. You will choose no more than 2 of the categories from these boxes here that you'll be providing services under the RFP. Number 4, you're going to tell us very briefly, just summarize exactly what the goals of the program will be and its objectives. So we don't need a whole page. We just need like a very short paragraph, 4 or 5 sentences, telling us the type of services you're going to provide and the goals that you intend on achieving. So for number 5, you're going to refer to the resource manual for CSBG and CDBG income guidelines to determine the percentage of clients to be served in these categories. So number 5, we're asking you to tell us the number of clients served, and you're going to estimate that percentage that meets the community services block grant income level, which is 200% of poverty. And you will see those income level chart on page 16 of the resource manual. If you do serve clients that meet this income level for CSBG, you can move on to the first number 1 here, and you're going to indicate whether or not you will accept CSBG funding for the provision of program services to these residents. Okay, you don't have to accept funding, but if you do, we would like you to indicate so here. If not, and if yes, if you're willing to accept the funding, then you will need to complete attachment 7 subrecipient risk analysis. I just want to stress, you do not have to accept federal funds. You don't want it. But if you are willing to do so, please complete attachment 7. Accepting federal funds will require you to provide us with additional documentation. And we'll discuss this at negotiation if you're awarded a contract and if you had checked off that you will receive federal funding. I am stressing programs, please read this very carefully, because in the past we have had programs that check this box without fully comprehending what we're asking of them, and then they're awarded CSBG funding, and then we have to really, really work to get them to understand what the requirements are. So please read this very carefully. And if you're not clear on it, please send us your questions and we will provide you with a response. Number 6, of the clients served, you're going to estimate the percentage that meets the community development block grant CDBG income levels, which are extremely low, or moderate. And you will see that income level chart on page 20 of the resource manual. Number 7, you're going to check off whether you're a human service program or administration of affordable housing project. For majority of the applicants, they tend to be human services program. There are a few that provide targeted public services. And finally, on the Form 2, you're going to indicate what regions in the county you'll be providing services to clients. So it could be all 4 regions, or 1 or 2 or 3. Moving to the next form, which is Proposal Content A Technical Narrative Form. And this form is to be completed by applicants who are requested greater than $50,000 per year. I'm not going to walk through the form because you guys will read the questions and answer. Just please note that there are response boxes provided, and as you type, the boxes will expand to fit your your answers to the question. And also note that you will need to watch the video, Becoming One Fairfax, an introduction to key concepts before you start answering the questions here on equity. Also note, the equity section bears the most points. It's 24 points. So the next form is the Form 3. Here is where you're going to list your outcomes. Remember, you can do a maximum of 7 outcomes. You're going to give us your organization name, the program. You're going to tell us in about 2 or 3 sentences the type of services you're providing. Below that, you're going to choose from the list of outcomes that are provided. You're going to select at least one standardized outcome, or provide us with an agency developed outcome if you have one. In C, you're going to tell us your measurement system, what you're using to measure your outcomes. And then in D, you're going to provide us with the outcome indicators. Now, please note that as part of the negotiation process, if you're awarded a contract, we will review your outcomes and your outcome indicator. Staff will do this, and we will work with you to refine any of the outcomes and their outcome indicators as well as outcome measurement. In E and F, we're asking you to project and tell us the number of individuals and households that you will serve during that 2-year contract period, which is FY25 and FY 2026. And the final section on the Form 3 is the estimating the number and percentage of individuals and households to achieve the outcome. So you're going to tell us the number of individuals and households, and you're going to also project the percentage for both years that will achieve the outcome. The next is the standardized program outcomes. Here's a chart, and it gave you some sample outcome indicators, which feel free to use. If you provide us with an agency developed outcome along with indicators, like I said, during negotiation, our team will work with you to refine it and to review it to ensure that it meets with the county standards and to ensure that we're capturing exactly what it is you're trying to do in terms of providing services. So you have a very robust list here to choose from. Quite a few pages. Now, I'm not going to speak to technical narrative B because it's similar to technical narrative A, but technical narrative B, you're going to complete that form for programs that are requesting less than $50,000 or equal to $50,000. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa, who's going to talk about the cost narrative form, and this will be the same or similar for cost narrative B for those requesting less than or equal to $50,000. Vanessa?
Thank you, Michelle. So to go over the proposal content A narrative, cost narrative form, there are questions here that you will complete, and you will just use this box here provided to answer your questions. They will expand as much as you need to respond. Question 1 is just answering the question. Question 2 is the completion of forms 4, 4A, and 4B, which we'll go over in just a minute. Michelle did talk about the indirect cost rate requirements. So no need to go over that. That's just a note there for you to look at. And then number 3 is the completion of Form 5. And number 4 is another answer, another question you're going to respond to with an answer. You can also see the points for each part of this. Right. And we're going to jump into the form. And so this is the budget form for your program. As you can see, there are areas in yellow. That's where you will be entering. Areas that are white or not yellow will give you an error, as these sheets are protected and will not allow changes in those boxes. Some of this information is also transferable from one sheet to another. For instance, program name and organization will transfer over to all the worksheets for Form A, Form 4B at the top, and 5. There are 3 fiscal years noted in this spreadsheet. If you are currently funded in FY24 with CCFP funds, you will complete the 2024 section. If you were not funded in 2024 through CCFP funds, you will only complete FY 2025 and FY 2026. Provided some examples here. The top section is the personnel costs section, which I'll show you transfers over from 4A. And then Section B here of this worksheet is the direct cost. I've included some examples, including, for instance, rent is $5,000 for the program portion. Something to keep in mind is this is program budget, not organization-wide budget. And you're requesting the CCFP of months for instance, $1,200 in this case out of the $5,000. If you have an audit, that's $500, and you're requesting $200 to be paid through CCFP funds, and so forth. That amount is automatically calculated at the bottom of these spreadsheets. Form 4A is your program personnel budget. I gave you an example here. For instance, Ann Smith is our program manager at ABC Food Pantry, and the program budget is charging $5,000 for her time, and you are requesting $3,000, for instance, in this case. We do require a justification here, which, as you can see, the instruction says to identify the number of hours per week spent on the specific program. So here I noted that Ann Smith earns $25 an hour at 120 hours that we expect her to work on this program, and that's how we came to this number, just as an example. If you scroll down, there's a fringe benefits section and payroll taxes. We do ask you to provide a detail on how fringe benefits and payroll taxes were calculated, and all of that will add up at the bottom. As I mentioned before, these numbers will transfer over to Form 4 automatically. Form 4B is the program budget justification sheet. This is going to review your direct and indirect costs. We ask you to provide a budget justification. This is very important. It is what's being rated. So for instance, if you're asking for rent or mortgage and it was for $1,200, we're explaining that this is to pay for the food pantry and storage facility, and so forth. If you scroll down, you also have a section for the indirect expenditures, and this will also add at the bottom of the sheet. There is a box all the way at the bottom of this worksheet. If the program is currently being funded by a resource other than CCFP, explain why CCFP funds are needed. If you were funded in the previous cycle and your amount requested represents a substantial increase over 5%, we are asking you to justify the requested increase in this box. And finally, Form 5 is the estimated program revenue. This is more considered a leveraging worksheet. You'll notice it's divided between cash resources. So if you receive federal support for this program, state, county, or foundations, client payments, you would estimate how much you're expecting for each year. Again, if you were not funded in FY24, you would not complete that section. You would only complete FY25 and 26. And then there's a drop-down box here that you can select. For instance, if it was United Way, we're still waiting on the response whether we're receiving this $10,000, and we add some notes here about our application status. Scrolling down, we have non-cash resources, which is donations in space. Let's say you're receiving a storage facility space that's being donated by ABC Construction, and it's valued at $15,000 for the year. You would include that there along with a justification. And then the bottom of the sheet is our volunteer section. There are professional volunteers and non-professional volunteers. For professional volunteers, you would enter the number of volunteers, the number of hours for those volunteers, and the value of volunteers. Please note that you are you're the one determining the value of volunteers. So as an example here, if I have an attorney working 20 hours in the program per year, and his or her hourly rate is $250 an hour, that would be $5,000. And then I also have an accountant who is donating time at 30 hours, $100 per hour. That's $3,000. And that's how I came to $8,000 as my professional value of volunteers. For non-professional volunteers, we do have an automated rate at $32.59 per hour in accordance with the Virginia Employment Commission. When you enter the number of non-professional volunteers and the number of hours, the hours is multiplied by the rate automatically, which will give you a calculated amount. And we do, of course, ask you to include justification or information. All of that, again, is automatically added for you. Let's go back here. We're going to go through these. One second, Michelle, need to get the attachments then.
Yeah, you need to pull up the attachments.
Okay, give me 1 second. Okay. So, all right, I apologize for the delay. So we're going over now the attachments that are provided on Bonfire. Attachment 1 is the affirmation of legally required contract terms. This is a required attachment, so please do read the information and you will sign on page 2 here. Attachment 2 is Fairfax County's business classification schedule. We do provide definitions here to help you identify which classification your organization will fall under. And then attachment 3 is a certification of financial solvency for nonprofit organizations. This again is also a required document. Attachment 4 is the Virginia State Corporation Commission registration form. Please do read the options and select the appropriate one for your organization. Attachment 5 is the certification regarding debarment or suspension. Pretty self-explanatory, just review. Attachment 6 is a certification regarding ethics and public contracting. We do ask you to check one of the boxes, and if you do check box 2 to complete this information, again, you're going to sign and date. Attachment 7 is the request for protection of trade secrets. This is an optional attachment if you do have something. If you do not, you can also just submit with an NA on there. We do want to highlight that your explanation must do more than simply stating materials are proprietary or trade secrets, not publicly available, and you can also attach additional sheets to the form if needed. Attachment 8 is the subrecipient risk analysis and compliance record. This attachment is only needed if you are saying yes to CSBG funding. If you are not saying yes, you do not need to include attachment 8 as part of your submission. And finally, attachment 9, this is new this fiscal year. It is a questionnaire. How it works is you'll go through each question and you'll answer yes or no for each specific item. It does guide you and does have links to definitions and additional information if needed. And if, for instance, you do answer yes to most of these questions, you'll likely make it to question number 5, and then you'll just select which one corresponds to you. We will review this information if you are funded at the time of negotiations to determine the next steps. Michelle?
Thanks, Vanessa. So this concludes the presentation part of the pre-proposal conference, and we're going to open it up to questions and answers. I just want to reiterate to everyone that the team will try their best to answer the questions off the cuff, but the final answers will be published in a solicitation. The team may also defer to answering and say that we'll provide it in the addendum. So you may hear we said, okay, we will defer that one and send you a written response. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Devin. Devin has been monitoring the chat box for the team, and he will go through and read the questions, and the team will jump in based on the question to provide you with an answer. Devin?
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Question one, the first question in the chat, will the it's a two-pronged, three-pronged question. It says, will the RFP document be updated along with the addendum documents? Will a program timeline be required for the application? And is attachment 8 required even if even if we won't have a recipient for our grant, or does the subrecipient refer to our organization?
So we'll start with the first question. Read the first part of that question again.
All right, the first question, it's like I said, it's a multi-pronged question.
Yeah,
Will the
Let's do one part at a time.
I
at
got
a
you.
time. Yeah.
Will the RFP document be updated along with the addendum documents?
So all updates will be published in the form of an addendum. So if there are any changes to the RFP document, that will be published in the addendum.
All right. Part 2 of the question, will a program timeline be required for the application?
You read the solicitation, a program timeline is required for organizations that are just starting a program. They do not have an established program. So that's the only time it will be required. But it's not for programs that are already in existence.
Okay. All right. No, thank you, Michelle. Part 3 of that question is attachment 8 required even if we won't have a subrecipient or for our grant?
Andrew?
So the subrecipient risk analysis form is only required if you click the box saying that you are agreeing to accept community service block grant dollars.
All right. And the last part of the question, or does the subrecipient refer to our organization?
So the subrecipient, Fairfax County, if you are receiving community service block grant dollars through the funding pool, you will be designated as a subrecipient by Fairfax County rather than a contractor.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Question 2. Several of the attachments for this RFP reference a DUNS number. I want to confirm that the reference to DUNS is not an error, and the attachments referencing DUNS don't need to be reissued.
Derek, can you answer that one, please?
Sorry, I had to find my mic. We had to get back with you because I know some of the forms we did change it to the.
Derek, can't hear you.
Yeah, we'll answer that one via an addenda. I know we did change some stuff, but we want to make sure you give you the accurate answer.
Thank you, Derek.
No problem.
Okay. All right. This question actually it's multi-pronged as well. It was posted in the chat as one large question, so I'm just going to read them one at a time. This one says attachment 9, cyber insurance questionnaire. How will we know that we have met the threshold that requires up to $3 million in coverage for cyber insurance?
We will provide that answer through the addenda. That will be a written response.
All right. The next part of the question is, are program position descriptions required for volunteers, interns, and contractors?
I can answer that. We will get that also to you in writing.
All right. Thank you. The next part of the question is, would you please confirm that the final addendum will be posted by 11/28/23?
Yes, that is correct. That will be 5 days before the RFP close. So the final addendum will be published by November 28, 2023.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. All right. The next part of the question, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we were able to submit one application with all required attachments, and then subsequent applications for additional programs only required program-specific attachments. May we do the same this year?
Yes, Bonfire, it is set up the same way. There will be some attachments that you will only need to submit one time. So if you're submitting multiple proposal, there will be, for example, if you're submitting multiple proposal and you're required to submit your IRS 990, you will only need to submit that one time. So yes to the answer. The answer is yes. It is set up that way in Bonfire for you only to submit some attachments once.
Thank you, Michelle. The next part of the question is, may we submit letters of support and memoranda of understanding if relevant to the proposed services?
Yes, you may submit letters of support and memorandum of understanding, but I will say this, we will clearly answer this question in the addenda because we will also need to tell you where in Bonfire to submit those letters of support.
All right, thank you, Michelle. The next prong of the question is relating to the technical narrative. When you say using Form 3, Section C, measurement system, describe how each outcome will be objectively measured in the plan for the outcome measurement implementation. Do you mean to expand upon what is included in Form 3?
We will send that in the form of a written response because we have to look at Form 3 and look at the question on the RFP. So that will be a written response.
I got you. Thank you. The next prong of this question is, may we hyperlink web sources in the technical narrative form?
That's a good question. We will look at that. The reason why I paused is the Selection Advisory Committee will be evaluating the proposal through Bonfire, which is electronic. So they would have the ability to click on a link, but we will provide that response in the addenda. We have to think that one through.
All right, thank you, Michelle. The next part of the question is, does Fairfax have a more recent indirect rate? I'll read the whole question and then you can let me know if we need to answer it separately in 3 ways. Does Fairfax have a more recent indirect rate? The RFP refers to the FY 2021 rate. If there is a new rate, may providers use the rate instead?
The FY 2021 rate is the most recent federally approved rate that Fairfax County has. So the rate that's listed in the RFP is the most recent rate.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, last prong of this question 2 is, how much funding is available for this RFP? Health, Housing, and Human Services. Is the amount available consistent with the amount that was available 2 years ago?
Sarah?
Sure, I can answer that. So it is consistent with what was available last time. All funding, though, is contingent on the board approval. And so there might be a slight difference in terms of the exact amount at the end of the time when we talk to you about negotiation. But as I mentioned before, it's approximately $8.8 million for this RFP.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, on to question 3. This introduction section refers to the resource manual. Are only the named pages 25 through 33 and page 5 applicable?
No, you are required to read the resource manual in its entirety. So we just reference certain pages in the RFP for the resource manual so that you can go there quickly, but you must read the resource manual in its entirety. The resource manual will comprise the full contract if you are awarded funding with the CCFP.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, question 4. Is the vendor registration process what's required to create a profile to apply?
Derek?
I'm assuming they're talking about bonfire. If so, the answer is yes. Because proposal, well, you can only get the information through bonfire. You can only submit your proposal through bonfire. So if this is a bonfire question, yes.
Thank you, Derek. All right, question 5. Please clarify when you say awardees may only serve Fairfax County residents. Does this mean serve only Fairfax County residents with CCFP fund? I'm sorry, yeah, CCFP funds.
Yes, CCFP funding can only serve clients in Fairfax County residents only. You can only use the funding pool dollars for Fairfax County residents.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, question 6. Are there cases where an organization might apply for $100,000 in funding, but the committee feels the project should be reduced and thus receives closer to $50,000 instead, or would it be outright denied?
Okay, so programs can request funding exceeding $50,000 or less than $50,000 as stated in the RFP. The Selection Advisory Committee will review proposals and funding. The funding recommendation is actually comprised of a budgetary formula using your scores. So it's not the Selection Advisory Committee who is actually reducing your funding. Your funding will be based on a budgetary formula, a computation. And I'm sure, go ahead, Andrew.
And just to add on to that, it is based off of the scoring by the Selection Advisory Committee based off of the technical and cost proposal review. There may be instances that based off of the scores, you might have an organization that is recommended for no funding. The funding pool with requests in the past, we've seen requests over $22 million in funding, which greatly exceeds the available dollars. So we have had instances where programs have not received funding or have not received the level of funding requested.
Thank you, Andrew. All right. On to question 7 regarding technical narratives. Is it meant to read that $50,000 each year for 2 years, or 50,000 total?
It's $50,000 each year. So if you're requesting $50,000 for your program, it will be provided to you each year, those 2 years. So year 1, you'll receive $50,000 if that's what you're recommended for award for. And year 2, you will receive another $50,000 if that was what you were recommended for award for. And all this fund is contingent upon the county's budget.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. On to the next question, question 8. Is there a minimum number of program outcomes?
There is no minimum, but you have to submit some. So there is a maximum of 7. So the minimum I would say would be 1.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, question 9. Will there be additional reporting paperwork that must later be submitted to the federal government?
Andrew?
When it comes to the community service block grant dollars, there's additional reporting, which is identified in the resource manual. Those reports and information are provided to the Community Action Advisory Board, which then is also provided to the state. The federal dollars we receive that are put into the funding pool come through the state first, so our reporting is directly to the state. But there is additional reporting. There's a different invoicing system in terms of payment schedule. There are some other additional requirements, which is why we encourage you to read. There's in the resource manual, in the frequently asked questions, there's a section there about impact of receiving community service block grant dollars.
All right, thank you, Andrew. On to question 10. The proposal narrative form only needs to be filled out if applying for more than, I think I just read that one. I'm sorry about that. Question 11. Can consultants, etc., be included in the budget or only salaried or hourly staff?
We will provide that answer in writing in the addenda. We need to look at it.
The consultants is a line item in Form 4. So it is one of the budgeted line items.
Okay, thank you, Andrew and Michelle. All right, question 12. Regarding budget forms, what if you are part of America's Charities and not United Way? Would you list that in the United Way box or under other?
That would be listed under other.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. All right, question 13 is multi-prong. I'll just read it in in sections. Both RFPs have as service examples neighborhood distribution sites. If a food assistance program applies to both RFPs under this service example, must the services outcomes indicators for one RFP submission be different from the other?
Why don't you read, since they're all, I believe they're all related to food in that question.
Okay.
block?
All right.
Yeah.
All right. If a food assistance program applies to both RFPs under this service example, must the services outcomes indicators for one RFP submission be different for the other, or can the same program dip into both funding sources for the same services outcomes indicators?
Okay, so Ramona and I together will answer this question. And we're going to give an initial answer, an overview, I should say, and then we will also write it. It's very important when it comes to food provision that you read specifically the intent and the purpose of the food disbursement. So RFP 2, as many of you know, is for urgent food, for people that need it kind of regardless of the time frame, but urgent food needs and requests. For RFP 1, as you can see in the category description and service provision, it is less about an urgent food need, but an ongoing food need, as well as food programming, etc. If your program is created in a way that has two different levels to it, then I can see that someone could be able to put in for both. But yes, you absolutely have to have outcomes according to both sections of your program. But most programs aren't in that way. So we need you to have outcomes associated with your program, and your program needs to be designed in a way that's specific to the intent behind the funding in this RFP as well as the RFP 2. Ramona, what else would you add? And we'll put this in writing as well.
I would not add anything else. That's it. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next question. All right. To clarify, item F in the program outcome sheet, the denominator for calculating the percentages are the values entered into item E. Total estimated number, receiving service, and it says correct. So, I mean, that's how the question was put in there. So
we'll answer it. We'll answer it in writing. It's okay.
Okay. All right. Question 15, what is the average grant range?
We can put that in writing, and we will create that answer through the last cycle. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Question 16, what percentage of applicants are awarded funding each year?
That we will have to go back and look at last cycle, a couple of cycles, to provide that answer. So that will be in writing.
All right. All right. Question 17. What is the maximum grant amount request allowed?
The funding
There's-
pool does not have a limitation on the request amount.
Thank you.
However, what is the total amount allocated to the pool, Sarah?
8 million.
8.8.
Thank you. I'm still gathering questions. Give me 1 second. All right. Question 18. What's the difference between leveraging and a match requirement?
I think we can get you that in writing.
All right. All right. The next question, question 20. It said, would you mind restating this? Since we are funding for 25 to 26, are we projecting not currently where we are, but where we expect to be?
Can you read the question again, please? I'm
Yeah,
kind of confused.
yeah, and it says since we are funding for FY 25 and 26, are we project? This is exactly the way it's written. Are we projecting not currently where we are, but where we expect to be? I mean,
Oh, I think I understand. So you're actually forecasting how many clients and households that you will serve in 25, 26. And I will assume that you're going to be using your current baseline, what you're serving, as a guide to help you make these projections for 25, 26.
okay, thank you, Michelle. All right, the next question, to whom do we reach out regarding questions about the resource manual?
All questions to the RFP, which includes the resource manual, must be emailed to the DPMM CCFP fairfaxcounty.gov email address.
Thank you. All right, it's another question regarding a hyperlink, question 21. May we hyperlink web sources in the technical narrative form? If helpful, the answer, yeah, it's pretty much the same question. May we hyperlink web sources in the technical narrative form?
Right, and we said we would provide a written response.
Yes,
If that
correct.
someone asks a similar question.
Yes, correct. All right, on to the next question, question 21. Could funding pool dollars be used to help Fairfax County residents who are in a program that also includes individuals from other counties, as long as the funds are used for Fairfax County residents only?
Can you read the question again slowly?
Yes. Could funding pool dollars be used to help Fairfax County residents who are in a program that also includes individuals from other counties?
So the funding pool dollars need to be utilized for Fairfax County residents. If a program includes other residents from other counties or locales, the program would be responsible to demonstrate that they're delineating how those funding pool dollars are allocated to Fairfax County residents, but other residents could be served with other dollars from either the organization or other locales. But the program would have to delineate how clearly Fairfax County dollars are utilized for Fairfax County residents.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, next question. Can you share the formula for determination of funding?
No.
All
I
right.
believe the RFPs to give you an idea, a blurb about how it's calculated, and that's all the information that you will need.
All right, thank you, Michelle. The next question is for those nonprofits who don't have direct access to clients served, e.g. a nonprofit providing a weekend food. I don't see. Okay, I'm sorry. I only had half of the question cut off. For those nonprofits who don't have direct access to clients served, e.g. A nonprofit providing a weekend food backpack program, is it okay to reflect outcomes obtained via the direct provider e.g. school staff?
I believe we've had this question before.
Okay.
And so, but we will put it in writing. But initially, I do know that they're utilizing school demographics and being able to report on those may be satisfactory, but we will put it in writing.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, and that's the last question that's in the chat.
Okay. Well, if there are any additional questions that you think of after this meeting, feel free to email us at the DPMM-CCFP fairfaxcounty.gov email address. Sarah, do you want to close off by thanking everyone for attending? I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Appreciate all of the great questions and the detailed questions. Those, as Michelle just noted, those will be posted in Bonfire. We also will be posting some information on the website as well. This pre-proposal conference, as well as the one that we did earlier for RFP 2, please know that all of the information will be shared with you all. Please continue to check Bonfire, continue to check the website, and ask per those email addresses, ask questions as you see fit. So thank you very much, and we'll get you all this information as soon as possible. And thank you for all the work that you all do. And have a good afternoon. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.